Chris, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me on The Reluctant Somm. Do you like this wine?
It's quite tasty.
It's good. Yeah.
I would drink this.
Yeah, we will drink this. I'm happy to have you. I've known you now for 2 years, and I think you're a wonderful person. I love your mindset on things. You're incredibly humble and very talented, and that's my kind of person. So thanks for what you do. Thanks for being a professional, and thanks for joining. For people that are listening, Chris does consulting, is manager, beverage director, wine director.
Wine director. Officially.
For the Fiorella Group, which includes 3, soon to be 4 locations. Additionally, you're overseeing things at Violet's and Uva as well.
Uva is no longer.
Oh,
it's
okay.
been sold.
Oh, I didn't know
So
that.
it still has the name.
Okay.
Uva, but I'm not involved in it anymore.
So just 5 places. Not that many.
Just 5 places, yeah.
And one of the things that I think is really cool about what you guys do that I've seen a lot of people start picking up on is the little carafe. What's that called? You're doing like
the Cortino.
Cortino, and you're doing like an 8 or 9 ounce pour. Is that
it's
what
an
you do?
8 ounce pour?
8 ounce pour.
And we also now do 5 ounce pours.
That's great. That's cool. And do you think people...
the reaction has been good.
Good.
I mean, I think people are excited when they order a glass of wine and they realize how big it is, 8 ounces. But now with prices going up, some of the higher end Cortinos are $24.
Yeah.
And so people are like, whoa, $24 for a glass. And it's like, well, it is a glass and a half. It is a third of a bottle almost. But if you want to spend a little less, you can do, a $13, $14 5 ounce pour.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it makes it more approachable for people.
For sure. I feel like I've seen in places before they'll do like a 3 ounce and a 6 ounce glass or whatever. I've heard people, I lived in Texas for 10 years. I've never seen it, but I've heard people on wine podcasts before say they go to Texas and Texas has a double pour. And like, I don't know, maybe I'm sure there's places everywhere you go that do double pours, but yeah, I mean, I like the idea of offering a different format for guests. I think that's cool. And also like, I was researching recently a producer Radicon, which is like this awesome orange wine. Well, they make other stuff, but that's what they're famous for. And he says he believes in only 500 milliliter bottles and 1 liter bottles because a 750 is always either too much or too little. And I always thought that was kind of cool. Very cute, very chintzy, So let's, I guess, step back a ways. I've known you the whole time as the beverage director or the wine director at the Fiorella Group. I know for a while you were doing some consulting. That's kind of how you got your foot in there. But, I mean, kind of where was your start in wine? What hooked you and what was your calling?
My start was around 2004. I got my first job in a restaurant in New York, which was actually a job that one of the co-founders of Fiorella at the time was a manager at a restaurant in New York, and we were friends. We played music together. We were roommates, and I wasn't doing what I went to school for anymore, and I was languishing in retail while at like the age of 27, 28, didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And he said, come work at this restaurant. They're hiring pizza delivery guys, and it's a Batali Bastianich Italian pizzeria.
That's awesome.
And at least you'll make tips, and you won't have to perfect fold t-shirts anymore. So I said, sure. And I didn't know anything about wine. I was actually straight edge at the time. I didn't drink.
Just a musician, a straight edge musician.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And time went on. I was working there, and they had an 800 bottle Italian wine list.
Jesus.
Which is pretty impressive when you look at a menu and the front page is the food, and then it's like a legal size folded over piece of paper, and the food is on the front, and then there's 3 pages of just wine, and it's all Italian.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything about a wine, let alone Italian wine. And as several months went on, I started sticking my toe in the water of drinking again. I hadn't since I was like 19, and don't tell anyone.
No.
That I was drinking before 21.
Mom.
But, and so that list kind of piqued my interest, and the wine director there at the time was pretty, he was very passionate to say the least. And so he got wind that there was like even a shred of interest and he was just like all over it.
So
he was like, read this book, like check this out. Like, you never know, like we might need somebody at some point, one of the managers might leave. And sure enough, I just started like kind of reading and learning on my own and with some of my colleagues. And then, one day they're like, hey, like we want to like try out like as a floor manager here, and you have to be in the wine program, and you're gonna like we're gonna immerse you. And that's how it started. So I always apologize to my parents for spending a lot of money to send me to communication school, and now I'm a wine director.
Wait, that requires communication. You have to communicate wine to people.
That
right?
is true, but maybe they could have saved a little bit of money on that. So
I've always thought it was funny. We ask 18-year-olds to decide on their future, right? Like how many people end up doing it is always be an interesting ratio. But that's awesome. And Bastianich is like synonymous with Italian wine. How many? Still a big importer, from what I understand. Dark Star, is that Bastianich?
I think he sold Dark Star, is what I was told recently, because I actually tasted with someone from Dark Star who wanted to, show me some wine.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh yeah, he doesn't own it anymore. Like it's under a new ownership.
Yeah.
But I think that sort of empire kind of got broken up with all the extracurricular things that were going on around it. Yeah. They closed. The restaurant that I worked at is gone. It closed a few years ago. And it was kind of part of that downsizing that they did. Yeah. But it's interesting because pretty much everybody, some of my best and longest running colleagues and friends that are in this industry still all worked at that place together. And that's where I met most of them, and they all were in that group and had similar stories of starting as a server, starting as a hostess, or starting as a pizza delivery guy. And like now we're all like in different aspects of the wine industry still, or the hospitality industry. So it's just interesting. So for all the craziness that happened there and all the bad stuff, that came out, there was a lot of people that learned a lot and kind of used it to, further what they were doing later.
Yeah.
So
I think so many restaurants are not exactly like that, but restaurant industry has never been a friendly place, right? Like I've in the past, I've been with people that haven't worked in the service industry, and it's always been like hard to explain to them, like, I use all my battery is depleted. All my niceness is gone. I get home. I don't want to talk. I haven't been locked in a cubicle all day. I'm exhausted. I've been talking to people and entertaining people all day long. And you get just really burned out sometimes. But there are places like that I think really can be an incredible platform for people to grow from. So I'm happy to hear that was an opportunity for you. And you were mentioning that's where you met someone that opened Fiorella, but was that the next step that you took? Or no, you were doing...
No, so I spent a few years working at Otto, was the name of the restaurant in New York. And my friend Boris was from the Bay Area, from San Francisco. And so he decided that he was going to move back and open a place because that's what he wanted to do. And so... took him a little while, and then it was like 2007 or so. He's like, "Hey, I'm gonna like this place, Uva Enoteca. I'm gonna open this thing. Would you be interested in moving out and like helping me open it, and be a bar manager?" And I was like, "Well, I know a little bit about restaurants now, but I don't know anything about like bartending or being a bar manager. He's like, yeah, well, it's just beer and wine. So you don't have to like, you know, it's not.
You're not going to make cocktails.
It's like, we're going to have a few cocktails, but they're like super easy, like, you know, Lillet Blanc, vermouth, like wine-based cocktails. You don't have to create them. The chef's wife, she's like, you know, she's like a bartender, and she's going to create these. And, but you know, you've advanced in your knowledge of wine and service, and I think it would be fun for you, you know? Mm-hmm. So I said, when else do I get a chance to move across the country, you know, and have it all set up?
Roll right into a job.
Right into it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I came here. So it was in 2008.
Wow.
And you know, the restaurant business has its ups and downs. And at a certain point after a few years, I was like, I don't really want to work in restaurants anymore. And I was like, I want to be a wine rep. I want to go to the other side.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. As I had a friend that I worked with at the restaurant back in New York, who had left a while ago to be like, you know, help an acquaintance of hers run this wine importing company that was all Italian wine. And she was like, hey, like, you know, we're looking for a rep in Northern California. We don't really have any distribution out here, but we're going to. And, you know, we're based in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, but we're trying to get a foothold. But she didn't actually tell me there was a job per se. Mm-hmm. She just said, oh, go on winejobs.com. That was the thing back then.
Yeah. Yeah. Still is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was just like, you know, you never know. And she didn't even know that the person they had hired to kind of launch things on the West Coast, who was based in LA, had already put an ad up, and I responded to it. And I didn't even realize, I didn't make the connection that it was her company. And so it just seemed like it was kind of meant to be. Yeah. So I was like, I told my boss at Uva, I'm like, you know, hey, I'm giving you a month's notice, but I'm out. I'm going to go the other side. And I was just like, so excited. I was just like, yeah, screw the restaurant industry.
No more weekends, no more nights.
Out of here. And then because I had given such long notice, I started my wine rep job, and it was, you know, there was like it was basically all commission based. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't really like realize like the kind of numbers that we're talking. So I was like, first month, it was like, oof, I sold $10,000 worth of wine, which sounds pretty good for your first time doing it. Yeah. With not really a lot of support, because most of the company was based on the East Coast. Yeah. And I was just kind of like blind calling people, just showing up, like working my connections that I had met from working in the restaurant. And I was like, oh, it's pretty good. And then, but when I got that first paycheck, I was like, I can't even pay my rent. Yeah. And so I was like, just kidding. Can I keep a couple shifts at Uva? Yeah. So that's kind of what happened, is I kind of kept, I tried to do the wine rep thing, and I did it for a while, and I did it for another company after that. Mm-hmm. But I always kept like one foot in the service, in hospitality.
The grass is always greener if you're on both sides of the fence.
And, you know, I don't know. I mean, I probably broke some laws, right? I sold wine to myself.
No, I actually, so I actually looked that up because I was concerned about that too. And it's only if the majority of your list is your wine.
Right. Okay.
So you're okay. Yeah. We'll pretend that it wasn't.
Yeah. So yeah, that continued on for a while. And then, you know, just slowly, you know, Fiorella opened their first location, and, you know, I didn't open it with them per se, but, you know, I was kind of selling them wine. Mm-hmm. And then as time went on, they're like, oh, do you want to take over the wine list? You know, and then there was another, and then it was, oh, we're opening up this sister restaurant, Violet's, down the street. Like, they kind of opened it, and then they're like, you know what? Like, can you just take, like, they had everything set up. Mm-hmm. And then like, after like the first week, they're like, we can't, like, there's too many other things that we got going on. Can you just like take this list that we created and just run with it? Yeah. And so that happened. And that was like, you know, my first time like really working more with wines that weren't just Italian. Mm-hmm. So it was like a challenge to kind of like, you know, work with some domestic wines, work with like a lot of sparkling wines at the time there, champagnes, and, you know, just different than what I had been working with at Uva, at Fiorella. But then they just kept, you know, the next restaurant came along and I decided to quit the rep side and go full-time wine director. Because I was like, you know what, I need that. I'm tired of the sort of up and down of sales.
Stability's nice.
And I always say that I don't really like sales and I'm not really good at it, but I know that what I do in hospitality is also sales.
Right.
But I sort of look at it as, if you're a wine rep, it's one of the hardest jobs in the world because you can have whatever product and you walk in, but if people don't want to buy it, you don't make money.
Yeah.
But if you are in charge of curating and then turning around and selling wine in the hospitality end of things, people are going to come to your restaurant.
They already want to spend money.
So they're going to buy something.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they can't just sit there and order a side of bread and hot water with lemon forever, you know? Yeah. So I sort of feel like they're hostages. They're going to buy something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not as cutthroat.
Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, that's something that I guess I don't really think about as often as it's like when people come to a restaurant, it's like when people go to a store, you don't go grocery shopping and not buy anything. And when you go grocery shopping, you don't need somebody telling you like, don't you need a cantaloupe? Don't you think a cantaloupe would really like round out your grocery selection today? Right. But yeah, that's a great point. You know, it's just a different side of it. And so you, like myself, have been on both sides of things and you can see the pros and cons. And I think that's awesome. I think it really kind of gives you a full picture. I've always been, so many people are probably going to hate me for saying this. No, we don't have any listeners and this isn't published yet. So maybe we'll edit it so I don't get burned at the stake. But I've always kind of thought like I should work in wine retail. That way I can just like round out my game and understand like the full scope of things. And obviously we don't have the bandwidth for that with the baby, this podcast, the consulting on the side that we do, the full-time job. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was fascinating to work both sides.
Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot. I learned how to be a better buyer, I'd like to think.
Right, yeah.
Because I try to always say yes, no, maybe, or fuck off.
Yeah.
Or, you know, because I know what it's like to just
string along is tough.
Just send emails and calls and drop-bys into the ether and just receive nothing back.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I always appreciated when someone I was trying to sell wine to just said, dude, I'm not interested.
Not interested. Yeah.
Like, good luck, but it's not what nothing, but you know, the problem is that a lot of buyers tend to just sort of not tell you.
Yeah.
They don't let you in on their thought process. And they sort of just kind of, they even when they don't mean to necessarily, they kind of string you along. And when it would just be like a lot easier if you could know where to put the time in, where to devote your time.
Yeah. Yeah. Because otherwise we're left to interpret, and being left to interpret doesn't always translate correctly. I mean, you can't be 100% correct if you're guessing. I think also too, this is something I was asked to talk on at our last sales meeting we got together at. And I think it's just getting worse. More than anything, I think it's like a bandwidth issue. You know, we're seeing everywhere. The buyer role is being consolidated. The SOM role is being consolidated. You know, you have now the AGM is the wine buyer, is the bartender, is the host, is the scheduling manager. And I mean, even when I was at Ozumo, you know, I had one admin day a week and I had 4 floor shifts a week. It's like, how much can I really get done in one day? And the 4 floor shifts, it's me managing the entire restaurant. We're doing 380 covers a night on a Friday and Saturday night. I'm not really hand selling any wine. It's me and one other manager for that many people. Like, I don't even have time to sell cool shit. I'm literally just like putting out fires left and right. And so I think a lot of, especially now, the challenge is that like, well, the exodus after the pandemic, but it's hard to get talented people. And when you do get talented people, you want to capitalize on their ability. And so people tend to like stack a lot of responsibility on that person. And that person wants to take ownership and they just take on all this responsibility. But then, like, you know, the ball gets dropped somewhere. And whether that's just lack of communication or it's, oh, I forgot that I scheduled something with you, or they miss their allocation because they don't respond in time, or like whatever it is, it's like you're borrowing time to spend it somewhere else, you know?
Absolutely. And that's been my experience, is that as time goes on, you're doing more.
Yeah.
I'm working 3 floor shifts, and
Yeah.
you're exactly right. I don't have time. How often do I get to go to a table and hand sell something to them? Most of the time, I'm just trying to make sure that the servers are performing proper table maintenance, and that the guests are getting their checks, you know, their payment run in a timely fashion so we can turn the table, or, you know, just make sure that, you know, everyone's doing what they're supposed to.
Or making sure the kitchen doesn't want to murder the front of house.
That too. It's like, it's running food. It's like, you know, it's just like I'm busting a table because, you know what, like you can't just be walking around, full hands in, full hands out, like, you know,
100%.
So it becomes, it's like your title is your title, but you do everything.
Yeah, everything. I mean, and I think like there's a lot of like honor that I wore when I worked those shifts and when I worked out those positions. And like my staff was always, I'll pat myself on the back. My staff was always like, Chris, you're a great manager. And I was like, thanks. But also the amount of stuff that I was getting job for the beverage, the amount of stuff I was getting done for the beverage side of things was minuscule. I mean, like I'd forget to order things, or, you know, I would not complete the new side work checklist correctly, or I would, you know, there was always, I'd submit inventory late for P&L and I'd get scolded for that. But, you know, at least I'm leading from the trenches and my team loves me. But also it's kind of like one of those things where like there's literally only so much bandwidth somebody has. And unless you're willing to work 6 or 7 days, or the business is even open 6 or 7 days, there's not so much you can get done, you know?
It's true.
We were talking about something in that fold. I had a thought. We'll come back to it. But okay, so and then you've stepped away from the wine sales side of things.
That's hard to say.
Sorry. Yeah, I know. Geez. Wine side sales of things. Wine side sale of things. Wine sales side of things. And so you've taken a step back from that, and you're mostly focused on just buying. But as you mentioned, you're serving too. And like I've seen your list, it seems like you have a lot of producers that you know you've worked with. You like those wineries, and it's cool to see that. Is there producers in particular you'd like to just like take a few minutes to highlight that you work with? Doesn't have to be mine. But is there?
I mean, I think it's definitely true. Like I definitely, especially since we focus mainly on Italian wine at our restaurants, and it's what I've spent the most time working with, learning about. It's how I got my start. Mm-hmm. So there's certain producers that are near and dear to
Close
me.
to the heart. Yeah.
And that's definitely true. Like, because I have less and less time, it's harder and harder to find new wines to put on because, and, you know, I always have to apologize to, you know, all the reps because they're like, hey, you know, like, remember those like 5 wines that you said you liked like last year? And it's like, yeah, but I still have like 5 wines that I tasted 6 months before the ones that you showed me that I still haven't gotten on the list yet. So it's just like a backlog of like, how long does it take you from when you say I want this wine to when you can actually put it on? So yeah, there's just like a lot of wines that maybe they're not initially something that I'm like super familiar with, but they become like the sort of everyday wines on the list.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, there's certain wines that it's like almost like I'll never change it unless like the winery closes.
Right.
And I know you say you don't want to talk about wines that you represent, but of course, like Cletto Chiarli with the Lambrusco, it's like we have such success with that wine. It's like such a good price. It's just like really delicious wine that goes literally with everything on our menu. And I just had a wine training with a newer server hire today where I was like going through all the wines by the glass. And when we talked about that one, I finished with that one and I'm like, and this wine actually unequivocally, I can't say that word.
You got it.
Goes with everything on the menu.
Yeah.
It goes with dessert. It goes with fried foods. It goes with pizza. It goes with pasta. It's great by itself. And so that wine is like a staple.
Yeah.
And then probably my favorite, it's like maybe not a secret that I always tell everyone, and that Nebbiolo is probably my most favorite varietal in all of the world. And unless somebody shows me something one day that I've never had before that somehow is better than that, I'm going to never be convinced that there's anything better than that for my personal taste.
Right.
So I'm always like featuring something Nebbiolo based on the list. And there's a producer that I used to sell on the sales side that I have a lot of respect for, and that's Odero.
Oh yeah.
And they're one of the most old school Barolo producers, and they're one of the few producers that are given an allowance by the Italian government to produce Barbaresco in a winery in Barolo. They they obviously grow the grapes in Barbaresco, but they're one of half a dozen producers that can then transport those grapes to their winery in La Mora and still bottle it as Barbaresco. So it's like, they're old school.
And that's something that is really interesting that you mentioned, that I think for anybody that's listening that's not aware of the law, usually you have to have a separate winery in Barbaresco. Exactly. You have to harvest the grapes, crush, process, ferment, do everything to completion within the DOCG of Barbaresco. Yeah,
I guess they've been around long enough that, so yeah. And so I just have a great respect for them. I've visited their winery. I was lucky enough. They were like, hey, you can come stay in this little micro apartment we have in their very old, historic house that the family has lived in for many generations. And it's just really, really beautiful. And it was my first and only trip to Italy so far, because I was, the pandemic derailed some things and I still haven't caught up to what I was supposed to be doing.
I hear you.
But it was just a very magical experience, and spending a lot of time in the Langhe, with the Alps, always in the distance. And, it was just amazing to just like explore that. And yeah, I mean, I always have love for them. They'll always be on the list. So yeah, there's things like that. And then there's just like things I feel like you have to have on the list. I'm starting to realize, that you can't always have these like really weird esoteric grapes and esoteric wines and expect to make money in this current climate. So I've decided to not to give up, but to sort of
bookmark,
make sure I have these things that people always want, even if it's like my version of it that I want. But, I'm not going to say no to having Pinot Noir by the glass. I'm not going to say no to having Cabernet Sauvignon by the glass. I'm not going to say no to having Sauvignon Blanc by the glass. It's going to have to be something that I think is, everything on the list for me has to be something that I think is well made,
right,
and has like purpose and tastes like it came from somewhere, not like it could just come from anywhere. But Do I have to personally like it? No, because guess what? Like, not a lot of people like the weird stuff that I like. So.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, I think, the general consumer is not maybe as adventurous, I don't think, is not the problem. I was going to say is the problem, but that's just kind of the way that it is. I remembered what I was going to ask, and it came up when we started talking about discovering new producers, and it was about how busy you are and how you don't really probably have the opportunity to go to a lot of like trade tastings and things like that. Do you find yourself ever like at the end of the day going shopping at the grocery store, or not a grocery store, but a wine shop, and buying bottles? Or is there somewhere so the podcast is wine and hospitality based, but it's also kind of focused on San Francisco. Obviously we're here, but there's people from other countries or other cities that want to talk about their city. That's great. Is there somewhere in San Francisco that you shop for bottles, or do you just find yourself kind of having a beer at the end of the shift? That's what
I mean, I'll be honest. Like, I definitely am more like I have a beer at the end of the shift kind of guy. And it actually happened the other night where a friend of mine was in town for basically like a day and a half, and he knows one of the owners of Fiorella and has known me for a really long time. So he always wants to come to Fiorella when he's in town, but he's not in the hospitality industry. He's in a totally different industry. And he's not really like a big wine drinker. Not that he's like, he would, if I told him you should drink this, he'll drink it. But he's like a Negroni is his favorite. I mean, that's one of my favorite things, but it's like funny because like we went into one of the locations of Fiorella, because, he wanted to go. And of course I picked the one where I don't work service currently, because then I don't feel like I'm at work as much. And now everyone's like, what are you doing here? It's like, oh, we haven't seen you in a couple weeks. Nice to see you.
Yeah, you can relax.
But what do I order? I order beer. I order a Negroni. I ordered zero wine. And so I sort of think like some of the younger servers there are probably thinking like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. I hope Chris doesn't like ask me a question about a bottle of wine, or like critique my like my wine service technique, but they get off the hook because I just order beer. I just order a cocktail, because that's it's just like, I don't know, that's what I think of when I want to relax. Not to say that I'm very relaxed now because of this wine, so. But so I find myself doing that more, but there are some really fun places to buy wine in the city. I feel like one that I used to spend a lot of time at, although I'm ashamed to say I haven't been in a while, is Beyond Divino. It was a place that was like one of my favorite places to go.
Street. And
I was super excited when I went full time with Fiorella and we opened a restaurant around the corner from them, and I was like, this is awesome, but they were always a place where I could go. When I was a rep, they would always welcome me with, oh, you have this producer in town, we'd love to do an event. And I would just like go to events there just to be able to taste. And I always thought that their curation was very good and sort of maybe unexpected for that neighborhood to be so Italian wine focused. And they were Carrie was doing it before anyone was doing that in San Francisco, it feels like.
Yeah, because right around the corner is William Cross, which is a little more loosely focused. So it's cool to see like a place like Beyond Vino that's exclusively Italian.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that was always a go-to for me. But now that I'm talking about it, I need to go see what they're doing these days and see what's going on, what the latest is. I still get the emails. Okay. So I still hear about what they're stocking. So so that was always a place that I would go to. But I'm just lucky because I have people that I get to work with that bring me really cool wine.
It's a lot of cool wine to be had. I mean, I think I've talked about this with a couple other guests too. It's like, I think in a way when you're in San Francisco I've been here for 6 years. And I feel like sometimes I kind of take for granted the amount of exposure that we have to incredible wines. But when I really think back on it, and I think back on Texas now as flourishing, and it was always really good anyways, especially the Houston market. But I was in Galveston, and like the wine that I was exposed to was relatively minimal on the grand scheme of things. I remember like the first Brunello that I had, and the first time anybody from Italy ever came to do a wine dinner, it was a guy from Banfi Winery. And it was like, I was so excited. I set up a wine dinner at my friend's restaurant that I later became the GM at. And this winemaker was coming into town, and I go like, I don't know, I can't host you at my restaurant, but let me introduce you to my buddy. And I remember he was asking for Fernet Branca. We went to like 10 bars and he was asking for Fernet Branca. And I was like, what's that? You know, I've never heard of this before in my life. And now it's like, you know, I probably drink more Fernet than I should admit. But we're so lucky to have so many cool wines, not just Italian wines or not just imports, but I mean, we're really in a beautiful epicenter, including the Napa, Sonoma, the Clarksburg areas really popping off. There's so many cool things. Paso with producers like Giornata and stuff like that is really fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I moved here with this like bias towards old world European wines.
Sure.
And, you know, I read an article recently, I don't remember where it was, but it was basically saying like debunking the whole, they said it's a myth. Like there's no, like when people say old world European wines, like they're like the stuff that people think are old world European wines, they've really only been like making for like less than 100 years.
Right.
It's just like, but it's like, you know, just like the fact that I first learned how to critically taste a wine, and it was in my glass, and it was like this Italian, an esoteric Italian wine. And so for me, that's what I love the most. So because of that. And so I think I moved here, and I was excited because I was like, well, I'm moving to San Francisco to help my friend open a restaurant, but it's an all Italian wine list. Right. So we're not going to carry any of the stuff from
bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. And, but you know, I think I was definitely wrong to think that it was all bullshit.
You just learned.
And I also think that it's evolved. Like
that's true.
Because I think there's newer people, younger people, different voices in the wine industry in California that are sort of doing things a little differently than what was the norm. And, you know, it's not all about like high alcohol, and it's not all about fruit bomb.
Oak to shit.
Yeah. And there is so many people making wine in California that's not what the stereotype was. And so it's really been fun to learn, but I know that I was wrong. I know that, you know, and there's plenty of bad wine from all over the world.
That's true. Yeah.
But, you know, it was interesting to move here because like moving from New York, it was like, and to this day, I've, you know, I don't get back to New York as much as I would like. And I have no idea what the hot restaurants are in New York anymore because I'm so far out of it. And it's just like such a massive metropolis that there's so many restaurants, and they come and they go. But I've seen wine lists, like, you know, chefs I've worked with here who like know people there who have worked there are like, oh, you know, like check out this this restaurant. They have a really cool wine list. And so I'll be like, oh, and they send me like the link, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, you know, this is really cool. Like this restaurant in New York, they can just have 100% European wine on the list and no one complains.
Nobody freaks out.
But if you did, but when I first moved here, it was like kind of radical to have an all Italian wine list because people are like, well, where's Napa? Where's Sonoma? Like what I don't want, what the hell? Yeah. So it's pretty cool that things have come a long way because I moved here it's been 16 years. Things have changed a lot. Yeah. But I've also changed. So. But I do still respect and envy those East Coast places that can just put their middle finger up to anything domestic and just say, nope, this is what we're doing. And they have no problem making money.
I've always said that I've lived 1,000 lies through wine, right? Like when I first got into wine, I was like, I don't like wine at all. I was learning wine because I was 19. I was managing. And I was like, I don't know shit. And all these customers come in and make me feel awful for not knowing anything about wine. And I go like, I'm 19. And they go like, so what? Like, you're still the manager of the restaurant. You should still know wine. So I learned wine out of spite. And then the first wine I remember really enjoying was Rocca della Mesi Chianti Classico. It's the first time I ever tasted a wine. I was like, I guess I could drink wine. And then it was like, I'll never drink Pinot. I'll never drink Chard. I'll never drink this, right? But yeah, I mean, 2007, I mean, the San Francisco wine scene must have been a completely different beast. I mean, that was kind of like peak Parkerization. That's kind of like everybody was just like you mentioned, like ABV was super high, fruit was high. They were harvesting as late as they possibly could, getting everything as ripe as they could. They're using tons of oak. I mean, it was like a lot of great things came from that. And I think I always try to parallel like scenes, or not scenes, but like phases in the wine industry. And like I think natural wine, the big phase that we're in right now, is bringing us so many cool things and bringing so many cool things to the forefront. I think there's a lot of like bullshit that sneaks in the door with it, but I think it's just kind of like opening the door to more cool things. But that's a great point. Like, you know, we evolve as buyers, but also the industry evolves in its entirety too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I mean, just the fact that, I mean, there's so much esoteric and unknown things from Italy in the grand scheme of things, but it's nice when like, because so many people are playing around with growing those varietals now in California, and it's like people are now starting to like recognize these things, and it's not just like Chianti and Lambrusco,
Right.
And you know,
maybe Brunello.
Yeah, and people know Barber. You know, it's like, but like people are like learning more, and it's cool, but you know, you're never gonna escape people being like, well, does this, like, they're trying to compare it to something that's more familiar to them. But what I've learned in the past year or so of things kind of taking this weird post-pandemic dip is that in hospitality, people, when they go out, they maybe don't want to spend a lot of money, or they don't have a lot of money to spend. And so what they gravitate towards is value and things they recognize. Yeah. And so it's forced me to sort of like take that into account now. Like, oh, maybe, you know, I can't have like half the by the glass list be, you know, indigenous varietals that people have no idea what they are. Yeah. Because they're constantly going to be like, well, what is this like? Is this like a Sauvignon Blanc? Yeah. Is this like a Pinot Noir? Yeah. So, and I like 6-7 months ago, I put a Cabernet Sauvignon on by the glass, and I had been kind of fighting it for so long. And I think all the staff, especially the younger, less experienced staff, was like, they almost wanted to give me a standing ovation, because they're like, now we don't have to say, well, we don't have that, but we have this. And it's kind of like that. And so they were just so excited that I gave them a softball. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I've really softened on that in a lot of ways, but it's still nice to have like some cool stuff. But it's interesting what you're saying about the natural wine and like, you know, that sort of where we're at with that. And, you know, I think I agree with you. You know, it's like, I never really thought about it as like that it's brought a lot of cool things in the door, in addition to, like, you know, like you said, some bullshit, but I guess I never really thought of it that way exactly. But I just, you know, I sort of bristled at it because I was like, oh, it seems like it's just a phase, or it's this or that. Yeah. To me, like, if wine is good, it's good. Right. So I'm hoping that that's the stuff that's gonna stand the test of time. Yeah. Yeah. But it is true that it's like sort of made people think differently about how they make wine, and just think about what's going in it. Yeah. And so it's good in that sense. So if it can decrease prisoner sales and increase sales everywhere else, true. I'm happy. True. Prisoners, you know, I used to sell barefoot. No disrespect to any wine in particular, but you know, sometimes marketing is a major factor, and people buy stuff because like they think that it's really cool, or they're told that it's really cool. And I think that's where like the paradox is with the natural wine scene, because you're also getting people that are saying like, it's a natural wine, so you think it's healthy, right? Or like, oh, it's natural.
And it's like, but there's no regulating body that's determining what's a natural wine and what's not a
Right.
natural wine. So some people are pumping out stuff that they're just like rushing to bottle. It's flawed or it's not complete, or you're getting bottles that are fermenting in the warehouse because they're not done, or they're not adding sulfites, which is fine in a lot of cases, but not in some. And yeah, I mean, that's just like fucking, there's a lot of weird stuff. I think it's like, to me, I don't know if you're seeing it at your restaurants, but we're seeing a major dip in rosé. Rosé is just skydiving right now. And I think that like natural wine is that next phase where rosé was, I mean, bulletproof for so long. And again, we got a lot of really bad brands with rosé. And there was a lot of really bad stuff. And then what happened is like the whole market just kind of like homogenized. We had a lot of weird things, a lot of different styles, a lot of good, a lot of bad. Then we got to a point where we had like a lot of like pretty good stuff, but they're all so similar that it became like, I don't know, rosé category feels kind of stale for me sometimes. But yeah, I don't know. I'm crossing my fingers that, the natural wine trend is just, I'm just happy people like give a shit what they're drinking, or like how what they're drinking is made, versus just like, I bash Truly and White Claw and every chance I get. So I'll probably get a cease and desist by the time they air this. But I'm happy that they're drinking something besides just like Truly or White Claw,
Sure.
So
yeah, I mean, like, I think, yeah, I think it's important that people just, they drink what they want to drink.
Yeah.
But I guess like maybe it's like, and maybe it's just because like, everything is so dogmatic and polarized these days. But it's like, sometimes it's like, is it politically correct that I drink like, a PBR? Probably not. Like, it's probably,
I drink Lone Star any chance I get. Yeah.
So it's like, but like sometimes you just want to like drink something and not like worry about like what's in it,
100%,
who made it, what the politics are. And so I think like, I'm sort of leery of like this like sort of like dogmatic view, although, maybe I'm dogmatic in my sort of like boosting of, old world European wines. I'm like, like, why does this guy like love Italian wine so much?
Yeah.
Someone's probably the opposite of me and thinks it's all garbage, and that, this, so I might be the opposite side, but I think it's just like sort of, I'm a little leery of it because I'm like, it's, I mean, I guess it's the same thing with beer, right? Like IPA, like, very hoppy IPA was like
and then
hazies. And people are like, well, if you're a real beer drinker, you're going to like explore this, and, lager is just, it's garbage and, it has to be cheap beer, but at the end of the day, it's like, you drink what you love and what you enjoy, and, you work a long day, and sometimes you just want something that's easy.
Yeah. I think to me, that's another thing when I think of like the natural wine trend. It's like the proletariat drink to me at this point. It's like, I always talk about like this wine program that I like, and it's not an exclusively natural program, but you go and you look at the menu and it says like beach blankets, whatever, sunshine and fun times or something as the wine description. And I'm always just like, how do they get away with this? And they're busy and people love it and they crush it. And I'm like, that's kind of what I think, I'm happy that there's a trend away from the stuffiness,
Sure. No, I know. And that's a good thing too, because like I always see wine as like a very stuffy thing. And even to this day, like, because I took a very non-traditional path, and sometimes I'm like, sort of feel, sometimes I'm like, oh, like, am I like, how did I end up here? And am I like an imposter? Did I like sneak in through the back door? And it's like, but I've been in the wine industry for 20 years. And so it's like, there's all different ways, all different paths. But yeah, it's like, I guess like for some people, at least, young people are getting into something they're learning about something, they're getting involved in something, and that's really cool. And like they could just be passionate about, like you said, about Truly and White Claw, but you know, hey, there's nothing wrong with that too if you want to do that. You know,
I guess my biggest issue with those brands is always that they were marketed as like healthy alternatives. That was always the issue that I had. Like low calorie somehow means like healthy. Yeah, I'm excited. I think, you know, the wine industry's in for a beautiful future. And I think, you know, we here in SF, I mean, I'm trying to rack my brain. When we were talking about it, I was trying to think of a few, but I'm trying to think of lists that are focused on one region. And one of the first ones that jumps out to me that I haven't been to, I'm ashamed. If you haven't been, I don't want you to be ashamed, but I don't know if you've been to Altavino yet.
Yes.
An exclusively Italian list from what I understand.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. And it seems like they do well, but I think it's just a different setting, right? Like the Fiorella locations are like busy. They a little more casual. They're like neighborhood spots. And Altavino seems like a little more, it's a husband and wife team, right? But it seems like there's a little more time to sit and actually like walk people through the menu.
Yeah.
Versus like a server with a 6-table section having to explain like, this is like Cabernet, but not like Cabernet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's more of like a slower, it's not a like turn and burn kind of place.
Right.
I'm sure they would love it if it was though, because, you know,
who doesn't?
You got to make money.
But rent is still expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I guess like when you think about San Francisco and you think about Italian wine or you think about that kind of thing, it's like A16 was like obviously one of the first, it's like
right? 99% Italian.
What year did they open? I don't know.
20 years. They just celebrated their 20th anniversary.
Okay, so they were, but like the funny thing is like when I moved here in 2008, so that was 16 years ago, right? You know, the way people talked about A16 was like as if it was like been around for 30 years already. It was like an institution. Yeah. So the fact that they were able to build up that reputation in like 4 years and then just like keep it going is pretty amazing.
It's incredible.
And obviously Shelley is like, you know, knows everything about, you know. So
I was like, wait, I have one of her books it's somewhere. I can't find it right now.
But yeah, so like that's like, but you know, it's like, the location here, it's like, you know, it's very specific location that's like often that neighborhood maybe is not visited by a lot of people because it's like its own little corner.
Yeah.
So just like I kind of lost my train of thought right now, but
no,
like you
fine.
did earlier, but
restaurants that are focused on not exclusively Italian, but exclusively one region's worth of wine.
Yes. And they're, you know, not one region, but one part, like the Southern Italian.
I guess even more specific.
I know that, but I know that they have wine from everywhere.
A couple things. Yeah. I mean, really like the again, like 98% of the menu is Southern Italian, which is super impressive. God, it had to be, imagine the amount of work you had to put in at the very beginning and you had to track people down. One of my friends, Tim, is running the wine program at Rowing Goat, which is on Union. It's a Georgian and Armenian restaurant, but they're focusing on Mediterranean wine specifically. But really, like their bread and butter is Georgia and Armenia. And he's like constantly doing research, trying to find new distributors that are carrying this wine, that wine. He's reaching out to the wineries, asking them to send a sales rep his way. I mean, it's getting to the point where like there's a couple wines that he's had that like they might just import directly because it's like, I mean, there's not really huge demand for it. And I'm sure, you know, back then the demand for Southern Italian wine was probably a little less, right? Like there's always been great value there, but like we talked about earlier, it was like Chianti, Barbera, Amarone was maybe popular like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, I that makes me flash back to, you know, I was talking about my prejudice about, you know, California wine.
Right.
coming from the Italian wine background, but I always remember when I was coming up in the wine program at the restaurant in New York, like there were a few like regulars that would come. It was like a 20-seat bar and like an enoteca in the front, and then the 200-seat restaurant.
Jesus.
But there are these guys that like kind of lived in the neighborhood, and you know, a couple of these guys were like doctors, lawyers, and they had a good amount of money to spend, and they would just, you know, but they were like super like approachable and down to earth.
That's cool.
And they just like loved wine, and they would come in and they had the money to spend on like expensive bottles, but they would play this game with all of the you know, the people in the wine program, all the managers there, and they would just be like, you know, pick me a wine off of this list and just blind me on it. I'm gonna buy the bottle, and I don't care. Like no, the price is no object.
Shit, yeah.
Just whatever you want.
Right.
It could be cheap. It could be expensive. I don't care. And like, I'm just going to play this game. I'm going to sit at the bar for like 4 hours, and I'm going to like, you know, sip on this wine, and I'm going to try to like figure out which of these 800 wines this wine is. God. And, you know, it was hilarious because everyone started to know the taste of these guys and like what they liked and what they didn't like. And so then there was this game of like, how can we like flip the script on them and get them to think that a wine is good, and we're going to tell them that it's like what they were so prejudiced against.
Yeah,
and this one guy, he was like convinced like that everything from Southern Italy was dog shit.
Yeah.
Like he was all about Northern Italy. And, you know, I had my biases in that direction as well. But he was just like, no, if it's like Southern Italy, it's probably dog shit. I don't want to drink it.
Yeah.
And, you know, there were a few wines that we tricked him on. And I don't remember the exact wines now because it's been, you know, 20 years or more. But like, yeah, we were able to trick him. And just because like there's just so much wine out there, like it doesn't always fit into the stereotype.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, like Southern Italian wine, maybe a little more, not as
glamorized.
Yeah. Not as, you know, glamorized as other parts of Italy.
Yeah.
So, it's really cool that A16 has like been able to build this like consistent, you know, product, this consistent like vision.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll never forget that guy. He's like, everything from Southern Italy is dog shit.
That's so awesome. Yeah, I mean, one of my first gateway wines in Southern Italy was Aglianico. I remember the first time I had it, I was working for Glazers, and you know, like I was the premier sales rep, which Premier leads the way. And in Galveston, there wasn't really a need. You know, here in the city, you have like a Southern Glazers rep or an RNDC rep. You have like 5 of them. And some are spirits. There's like 3 spirits guys, and there's like 3 wine guys. And in Galveston, there was just me, and I sold the whole book. And the book is massive. And there was so many wines that I like never touched on. And then there'd be Italian restaurants, and I'd like just pull random shit. And I remember the first time I tasted Aglianico, I was just like, oh, wow, what is this? And the first time I came to San Francisco, we went to Howell's Wine Bar, which is right next to A16. And I was with Bianca, and I said like, oh yeah, I love Italian wine. When you're young, you're always dumb, right? And I was like, I feel like I know a lot about Italian wine, you know? And then we went to A16, and I was like, I don't know shit about Italian wine, but I remember being super stoked that she had like 3 Aglianicos by the glass. She had like Terrassi for like 28, another Aglianico de Fuchure for like 20, and then she had like some other Aglianico for like $15, and I'm like, this is so cool. And it's still cool. I mean, I still go, and I'm just like a kid in a candy shop. I'm like, I probably only know 10% of these wines, and there's so many that I want to try, but I just know that like if Shelly's got them, I'm in good hands, and her staff's really knowledgeable. There's winemakers in there like every week. So
yeah, I mean that's the hardest thing now is like educating your staff and getting it to stick.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm realizing is that so many people, like, I mean, I found my way into this industry just by chance, just by like, hey, like you should come work here because you'll make tips and you don't have to perfect fold t-shirts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of people just find their way in because they're like, oh, I'm going to school and I need a job. I need to make money. And like, it's a good deal in San Francisco because you get paid the same minimum wage plus tips.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't expect that every server that comes into our restaurant is going to give a shit about hospitality.
Right.
But we're trying really hard to kind of like give them all the tools to
Yeah.
give a shit about
Yeah,
hospitality.
yeah.
And it's like a new focus for us, like more than ever, because we're realizing how important that is and like to give them the tools. But like, it's like really hard to like figure out like ways to get people to retain the information.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now we just do repetition.
Yeah.
Because even if they don't care, if you talk about the same thing 7 days at lineup,
it'll get in there.
It's in there. And then the next week you have a new thing.
Yeah.
And then maybe you revisit 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's all, and it seems like it's working, but it's really weird. But I feel like the age of people working in the hospitality industry is getting younger.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of the thing too, is like you were saying before, exactly what I've been thinking for years is the whole, like, how is someone that's 18 years old supposed to decide what they want to do with the rest of their life by picking a major and going to college?
Yeah.
Like how does an 18-year-old know what the hell they want to do?
Yeah.
Because I went to school for communications, for TV and film production, and now I have a 20-year career in the wine industry. Like there's nothing in my life when I was 18 that would have predicted where I am now.
No way.
But like, it's just like, it's interesting to, with the people that are so young in our industry, it's like, there's good and bad about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, like they're young and they're like hungry, or they're young and they have no idea,
or they
don't care.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So how do you like harvest and like sort of foster and, like, how do you find the people that have that passion and sort of like, mentor them.
Yeah.
And it's so hard.
Yeah. I mean, if we could figure that out, we could figure out so many other things in the universe. I don't know that we'll ever get there. Yeah. My dad was a plumber and my mom sold foam in chairs, like I never thought I would be into wine. My dad forced me into the restaurant industry. It was like, I'm a plumber. I work outside and I sweat my ass off all day. I want you to get a job that's not physically demanding. He didn't force me into the restaurant industry, but he said, go work with your aunt in restaurants in Texas. Go get her to get you a job and see if you like it. But what spoke to me immediately was I liked taking care of people and I liked making people happy. And I was a food runner at 16. And somebody would like joke like, oh, this coleslaw is my favorite thing. I wish I had another. And I'd like just go grab them a coleslaw and bring it to them. And they'd be like, oh my God, that's so nice. And it was like a little gesture, one little ramekin of coleslaw, like made their experience. And it was.
Yeah. I mean, I think like especially now, at least I feel like it's probably everywhere in the country, right? But like, especially in a place like San Francisco, people are going out a little bit less.
Yep.
And so it ups the ante of like, when they do go out, it has to be really good.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And so I'm just starting to realize like, you know what? They chose to come to our restaurant. And so we're trying to make sure that they have the best experience possible, because it might be their one night out this month. Yeah, yeah. And if they come and have a bad experience, then I'm like, man, I just ruined their whole month. I ruined their whole year. So it's like, I guess like I sort of, and I don't know. I don't know if this has this happened to you because you're in this industry, because you've worked on both sides. Do you feel like sometimes you go out and you have a bad experience because you sort of know all the,
you manifested it kind of,
well, because you just know what you're looking, you know what to look for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're like, oh man, like, I can't believe they did this, or I can't believe that this happened. And like, do you think like you feel like you have bad experiences because You just know too much.
I think I think it happens. I think also too there's like unhealthy expectations you set on certain places. I took Bianca for her birthday one year. Went to a very famous restaurant in San Francisco that their chicken is what they're known for, and we didn't have a good time. And there was a few steps along the way. I mean, I don't think that there's like a one thing that'll ruin an experience, but it's like after like 4 or 5 things, it just becomes kind of like a burnt experience, especially when we have a bottle of wine, we get the signature thing, we ordered some shellfish to start, and it's a $500 meal. Like it's really hard to justify wanting to go back when the host didn't care that it was a birthday. We sat at a bistro table. The table was wonky and couldn't even fit all of our food and our wine. And they took the wine away and then they never refilled the wine. And then it was like, there was a lot of like missteps along the way. So I feel like probably in a way, because I know what I expect for that amount of money versus like just being enthralled with the fact that like, oh my God, I'm in this place that I've always wanted to eat at for the last 5 years. I'm finally here. I'm finally eating here, and just being kind of like mystified by it. But it's like wine. I think it's the same reason we drink beer at the end of the day. It's because drinking wine is just like, it feels like work, right? And it's like, we're over analyzing it. So it becomes like not less enjoyable, but I think it's harder to just relax and appreciate it. So in a roundabout way, yes, it happens. Speaking of wine, you're enjoying this wine. I wanted to show you something that I thought that you'd enjoy. Do you have any guesses? You don't have to. Again, it's not a blindable wine. But if there's anything that you want to throw out there, you can throw anything out there.
I don't want to say.
Okay,
I'm like, I have some ideas, but I don't know.
No, that's
I'm
fine.
Not sure.
It's like pretty out of left field. So Matthias Scarborough, Scarborough Winery specifically. This is the My Time Bianco. This is a Chardonnay blend from Freely, 2018 vintage. I was excited to share this with you because you used to distribute the wines from Scarborough. Is that correct?
Yeah. I was first introduced to their wines working at the restaurant in New York because we carried those wines.
Oh, because they were a Dark Star.
Yes. Yeah. And then, yes. And then the distributor that I worked with distributed those wines. But if I'm not mistaken, we didn't have those wines in California at the time.
I see.
Back then. So I don't think I actually ever got to really sell those wines, but they were one of the earliest producers I was exposed to for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking earlier about orange wine, and their orange wine is like a daily drinker for me. I love that stuff.
Like I had in the back of my head, I'm like, I knew it had to be Italian wine because I just know, what, my, what I like, but then I was like but then I was slightly fooled because I was like, well, there's definitely like, there's oak treatment.
Sure.
There's something like, it's definitely it's a little bit different.
Has this appley pomiferous kind of character to it that you don't find in Italian whites. But I was
like 99% convinced that it was from northern and it was northern Italian. I was like, there's no way this is from southern Italy. But I didn't know exactly what it was.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
It's a ringer. I mean, again, like I said, it's definitely not blindable. I think it's like 40% Chardonnay. So it's not, I don't even remember the other grapes that are in this wine. I was going to look it up before you got here and then I forgot.
It's probably some Frilano in there or something.
Who knows? Whatever. It's whatever they felt like at the time. And every vintage it changes. I mean, I think it's always like majority Chardonnay based. But yeah, I wanted to share it with you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's quite enjoyable.
Oh, it's super cool. Yeah. I think it's a lot of fun. I think the 18's gone. I think, there's there's a couple bottles somewhere if you know who to ask. Maybe I have a few bottles somewhere. But yeah, I guess, we should kind of start reeling towards the end of the podcast. But I have two questions for you. One question is, what does hospitality mean to you? And then the other one is, do you have any closing statements? So I'll let you take the first one.
I mean, I think hospitality means a lot of things to me. But I think what I was saying to you earlier about sort of the realization I've come to of just like, it's not really what it means to me, but because I'm in the industry, it's like, what does it mean to the people that are coming in?
Mm-hmm.
And it means something a little bit different for everyone. And so it's just like, I think it's like just, what it means is that you need to be receptive to if you want to be successful in the hospitality industry, you have to be receptive to what people need and want,
Mm-hmm.
And what will make them have a good time in the moment. And it can be different for everyone.
Yeah.
Because some people, it's like some people go to the restaurant and they don't want the server to really talk to them too much. They just want to enjoy their meal
or their company or whatever.
And sometimes they want a lot of information from the part. You just reading, understanding what people are looking for. And most of the time people just want to feel like you're paying attention to them.
Yeah.
And even if that paying attention means not paying attention,
staying out of their way.
Exactly. Yeah. So hospitality means just like being able to like, understand what your guest needs and do your best to fulfill that. Because at the end of the day, it's like, you might say like, oh, well, I think it's like, you might say, oh, well, like my restaurant, my wine program this is for these people, but it's for everyone, right? So you have to figure out how to make it work for everyone, because otherwise you're not going to be doing it.
Yeah.
That's true. So, you went to a certain famous place because of the experience that they're known for, but at the same time, like, that's not enough if they don't if they're not empathetic or understanding of like what you need and what's happening in the moment. So like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So so like they have something, but they also have to be open to,
read your table.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what it means to me. Because I mean, like, people come in a restaurant and they're in a bad mood.
Yeah. And
sometimes they take it out on those people, but you got to just take a step back and say, you know what, like,
turn it around,
and so that's what I try to tell the young servers is just like, hey, I know this person's kind of a pain in the butt, but like, they're a pain in the ass, but like, guess what? If you sort of understand and anticipate what they want and you give it to them and you do it really well, then you might, all of a sudden it might change everything and flip the script.
99 out of 100 times you're going to turn their experience around. And in fact, they may become a regular because they came in, they were having a really shitty day and they came in and they had a great meal. We had Emery the other day was, kind of being difficult and a little frustrated. We went out to eat and the server did something really simple, like bring us like a cute little kid plate, plastic silverware and a plastic cup with a straw. We didn't have to ask for it. She just brought all of it. And I was just like, this is the best service I've had in months, Yeah. Because it was just like so anticipatory, right? Yeah. She was just on it.
Absolutely. And that's what I always tell everyone that like works for our restaurants is like, if we can like foster and like build this like clientele of like regulars, then they'll like make up for the guests that make you feel bad and give you a bad tip and just are really rude to you, because like at the end of the day it won't matter because you're like, oh, this guy's here again and he loves us and he's like super cool and like she's always super happy and smiling and like you know, whatever, you know, it's just like, you know, those are the people that make your experience working here good.
Right.
So we need to like create more of those people.
Yeah. You have to create them. You have to create the regulars. You have to create the environment, and you have to create the demand to want to come back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that, I guess that's what it means to me. You know? And just figuring out how to, you know, because we all have our own baggage and things we come in with. And it's just like figuring out how to just check that all at the door and just like figure out how to like make people have a great experience.
Yeah. I'm here for one thing, and it's to make people have a good time. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It helps to, you know, have wine to
that's the best. Yeah. And then do you have any closing statements? Anything you want to tell future listeners or current listeners or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just like, you know, obviously people are watching this or listening to this because, you know, they have an interest in wine.
Yeah.
Or hospitality or whatever it may be. But they obviously, if they're going to watch this, they're interested in that. Sure. It's just that, you know, there's no limit to what you can learn, and there's no rules. Yeah. Cause like, I definitely feel like like I said, snuck in the back door. I didn't follow the traditional route. I didn't, you know, I did everything. Like, everything I learned was like kind of like, you know, on the job, on my own. So I think like, just like if you are passionate about wine or hospitality or the service industry, or the wine industry, just like go out there and explore, because there's no rules and there's no set path. Yeah. And, you know, you can't teach passion for things. Right. It just is or it isn't. So yeah. It's a great point. All right. That's it. Thanks. Cheers.